I find it interesting. We see this in powerlifting as well, where some of these men and women are able to tap into, like, some people are just really well trained. They train really well
Yep.
and they end up getting the results. It's like quite obvious, they lift 600, they lift 650, 675, 700. There's a natural progression. But we sometimes see these athletes that can tap into, they're not lifting like 20 more pounds than the best guy. They're sometimes lifting like 100 pounds more than the next guy, and they're
So
so unbelievably explosive. And we're we're looking at each other like, this guy's from another planet. Like, what are maybe some of these people able to tap into?
So this is not our research. It's research. I'm going to forget the name of the scientist's name. He's at the University of Pennsylvania. He was looking at physical strength. He was looking specifically at this question. And as you probably know, there's a governor on most of your behavior that says you don't want to hurt yourself, right? So in any physical exertion situation, most people are only able to give 60, 65% of total rate of total strength. You can train yourself up, as you know, to about 85%. And that's where most people tend to tap out. But there's an extra 15% of reserves. We override these in flow states for mechanisms I'll talk about. And during like adrenaline experiences where the woman lifts the car off the baby, right? That's one of the things that's happening. Flow does it. There may be a mechanism for increasing strength that we are not completely aware of. Right now, the current thinking is, and there does appear to be a boost of testosterone right at the front end of a flow state. That does seem to be fairly consistent, but you get both anandamide and endorphins, right? Really powerful painkillers. And so a lot of that extra force is massive amounts of painkillers. And people don't realize this. Endorphins are opiates, right? So they're Oxycontin or heroin or whatever, about 20 different endorphins in the brain. But the most common one, it's 100 times more potent than medical morphine. So you're talking about really powerful painkillers, really powerful drugs. And normally, worth pointing out, like if I were to give you that much morphine, heroin, Oxycontin, whatever, you're not lifting shit. Right? Like it's just, you can't tap into that. It'd be a disaster trying to go to the gym on those substances. Flow allows you to get the kind of the pleasure and the pain relief without kind of the loss of everything else that normally comes along with those substances.
Yeah. You mentioned that little boost in testosterone, right, at the beginning of flow state. Has your research shown that like maybe a male with higher or lower testosterone has a easier or more difficult time getting into flow?
Yeah, it's so tricky, interesting question. And I should caveat on the testosterone. Our work is showing, and this is in conjunction with Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford a little bit, that you may need to trigger the fight response to get into flow. And if that is the case, you will get testosterone with it. So that's what we're looking at. You also get surges in cortisol and things like that right at the front end of a flow state. Are there male-female differences? We've been looking at that question. There appear to be some slight male-female differences, which could signal differences in testosterone levels. Certainly. So here's the best way I think about it when we talk about individual differences or personality differences even. There are flow states have triggers. The reason we know flow is reliable and repeatable now is because we know that flow states have preconditions that lead to flow, and there are sort of 22 of them. They're all known. And they will all basically work by driving attention into the present moment, because flow follows focus. And that's what all the triggers do. They do it different ways neurobiologically. But the point is that not everybody is susceptible to the same triggers. Right? Risk is a flow trigger because it produces a massive surge of dopamine in the body. Now we know people have all kinds of different receptivity in their D2 dopamine receptors, right? Which if they're really active, you have sensation seekers, or that can also be the product of low dopamine production that requires, right, you to do more extreme things to get more dopamine. So there's a lot of individual differences all the way down to the receptor level that say which triggers you're going to work with. We haven't seen anything that says this type of person we'll get into flow more. We have like the closest we've come is we've linked, there are known high gratitude. For example, we did a study with Glenn Fox at USC, who's kind of one of the better researchers on the neuroscience of gratitude. And we found that people with regular gratitude practices tend to have higher flow lifestyles. There's things like that. And there, Csikszentmihalyi, godfather of flow psychology, talked about a lot of his early papers. I think it's in flow. It's definitely in Flow and the Foundations of Positive Psychology, one of his textbooks, where he talks about the autotelic personality, a high flow personality type, and certain traits that are associated with that. And of course, those traits are going to be underpinned by things like testosterone levels and hormonal production, things like that are going to sit underneath that. So there is the answer is probably yes, but we have no idea what it is yet. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter, meaning evolution shaped flow for all humans, right? It's for us to perform at our best. It wouldn't make sense if there was a privileged group. There'd be privileged ways in that would make sense depending on personality types. But I don't see it working that way from an evolutionary perspective. Of course, that's really hard research to do. The evolution of flow is, one of the least researched of the topics, but that's just, I'm a little outside my lane here. So I'm a little sort of talking out of my butt, but I'm trying.